Great stuff, James. Yeah, the whole Obama thing is extraordinary, isn't it?
It is absolutely extraordinary.
Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence, has referred Obama to the Department of Justice or the FBI or someone. How bad could this get for Obama?
Well, it could theoretically get very bad. I mean, one of the things that we've seen here, and it's really interesting how all of the different stuff that they used to try and get Trump could be turned around on Obama. So one thing you'd note is that there was a Supreme Court decision that everybody misreported that said Trump was above the law. No, they said that actually on certain things they can prosecute a sitting president, and that could also apply to Obama,
treason would
former
not be,
president, and
you wouldn't have immunity from treason, presidential immunity. This was, I mean, this is astonishing. It was a quiet coup. That's what it was.
Of course it was. It was a bureaucratic coup.
And it was successful in many ways. It completely undermined Donald Trump's first term.
Absolutely.
There's a great many Americans to this day who think Russia hacked the election and that the 2016 election result wasn't legitimate. So
there's a great many Australians, namely those who watch the ABC.
Because
the
Channel
ABC
10
did a massive...
or Channel 9
The ABC
or
still
Channel
has
7.
on its website, without any sort of correction, the whole Russia, Are You Listening?
What a joke.
Podcast
Greatest.
that were entirely based around, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars sending people to Washington around the world to try and chase down this Russia hoax. I mean, what a great use of Australian taxpayer dollars.
They did that when it was already clear to anyone with a functioning brain it was a hoax. I mean, they did that quite late in proceedings. And if you're actually paying attention to this story, you knew it was completely without foundation. There was just nothing there to warrant the mass hysteria that we saw for 3 solid years.
Let's
4
not
years
forget.
Almost.
Let's not forget, as part of the initial investigation that found nothing and that there was no there, they wiretapped Donald Trump's Trump Tower. That means that, I mean, you want to talk about Watergate and the Watergate breakout. Well, hello here. They wiretapped a presidential candidate, his business, his office, his home. Now, that's not an attack on democracy, and they found nothing.
We had, 25 states trying to kick Donald Trump off the ballot. You want to talk about undermining democracy. So this is the biggest issue of the decade, of the century, possibly. It has been so underreported, and I think part of the reason is obviously the politics of the media, but also the fact that the media was complicit.
They were in on it. They won
knew.
Pulitzer Prizes. They won Pulitzer Prizes at the Washington Post, the New York Times, and they got all the kudos from all of the lovely lefties because the entire game was, we've got to stop Trump. Now, for them to go back and say, oh, hey, we kind of got it wrong here, we were used. Well, of course, we know how it works. They were all getting information dropped out to them by their sources in the intelligence community.
Jake Tapper will write a book in about 5 years saying, that Russian collusion hoax.
Let's also not forget this. So Tulsi Gabbard basically revealed how the Obama's team, the FBI and others, were told to go out and create the proof, manufacture it. Now, we still have, and nobody ever talks about this, the Australian High Commission in London played a role in this. Now, the individuals involved have said, we didn't really know what was happening. But the fact of the matter is that was one of the cogs in that thing. In other words, the Obama White House was quite happy to use its Five Eyes members, one of them being the Australian High Commission in London.
But they were unwitting idiots.
They were unwitting idiots, absolutely.
But
nonetheless, we were used. It was used.
We were taking advantage of intelligence into the system here.
Absolutely.
And this is, by the way, this all, I mean, we've spoken about this other issue, too. This use by the United States or certain forces within the United States to use events in other countries to change politics in the U.S. Same thing's happening with our e-safety commissioner.
100%. The e-safety, that is another issue.
We need to talk about that a lot more.
The timeline is fascinating because after he won in 2016, the reports came in, Russia didn't try to hack the election, and that's when, in that interim period between November and January, when the inauguration was...
It gets even worse than that.
They manufactured the evidence. They
manufactured it, but President Trump began to receive daily briefings like he was the president to get him up to speed. Obama ordered the one that said there was no evidence to be destroyed and not released because that would have been given to Trump, and Trump would have been able to wave it around and say,
just one last thing on
innocent.
this, which is hilarious. And again, this came out in the latest trove of documents that have been declassified. The Russians wanted Hillary to win because they realised just how cuckoo she was, how unstable she was. And again...
it's in the documents.
That's in the documents.
Kind of crazy lady.
And you know what? You look back, and we did report on it at the time, there is footage of her just behaving weirdly, bizarrely. Absolutely bizarrely. And, just when you think this can't get any worse...
it's got a long way to go.
Another declassified document comes along.
We're going to take a break in a second, but also the way that they use the thing you mentioned, James, about using international and other bodies and that to spread the news, they do that with climate change. So over in Europe, they talk about the Great Barrier Reef being where the seas are rising or the oceans are melting or whatever. In Australia, they talk about, they do the same.
It's all networked.
Yeah.